Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the ATI Podcast. Barrett here for episode 83 of the ATI Podcast. Already in the second season. Things are starting to near an end here on the second season, and I'm very excited about what I'm bringing you today. Today, we're going to be speaking with Spotlights, Ipecac Recordings, hailing from the Northeast. I believe Brooklyn is their advertised location, but I believe members of the band are in the Pittsburgh area as well. We're going to get into a deep dive of their sound and catalog. We're going to focus a little bit more so on their newer releases that came out this year and some of the projects they have going on, but we're going to have both Chris, the drummer, and Mario, the lead singer, lead guitarist, only guitarist for that matter, audio engineer for the band, kind of a jack of all trades. We're going to have both of those gentlemen on the call today. We're really looking forward to bringing our audience our conversation with Spotlights here in a moment. Before we get there, of course, you know how we do. We like to open up and warm the band up, if you will, with some current events, topics, and talk. I'm flying solo today, so we will not have the usual co-host interplay, which is just fine. I can talk at myself all day long, or my wife will tell you that exactly the same. I'm just going to pick out one topic for this week for us to talk about, and we've kind of talked about this to somewhat ad nauseum. We got to talk about the fact that Donald J. Trump indicted once again for his attempt to overturn the election results. This is his fourth indictment. Trump and 18 of his allies are charged via grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia. Charged under Georgia's Riot Act. So that's actually a racketeering act that they put into place some years ago, and it made it a little bit easier in pursuing the charges through those avenues because it is an act specifically that was passed to target against white-collar crime and political corruptness. And a lot of the charges that are taking place, of course, related to the attempts to overthrow the election and January 6th and all those unfortunate events that took place, point back to Trump and his team and the things that they were attempting to do. So kind of famously in time, if you all remember, there was a call made to Georgia election officials telling them to find 11,670 something votes. Might have the last few numbers transposed there, but essentially, encouraging them to change the election results, which totally defeats the ideas of democracy and institutions that this country is built upon. These are fascist type moves, and is something that we have to speak out against. This is our platform. And I can't encourage folks enough to, pay attention to what's going on around you. And people that have upheld this stooge, President Pig shit in particular, we're in Missouri. We're unfortunately in a state that's used to be a swing state, but has turned into almost a conservative wall nowadays, unless you're around a major city like a St. Louis, Columbia, Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri. Those lean liberal, usually vote liberal, but everywhere else is so predominantly red and big turnout. So Missouri usually, in almost all cases, all the way back to the 90s, has went Republican. So there's a lot of people in Missouri in particular, a Schmidt, which is our representative, Josh Hawley, a senator from Missouri. These people are people that have rode the coattails of a Donald Trump and some of his policies that he's taken under his wing and has really just royally fucked the people of Missouri in particular. You think that these people, and this is a comment that I can make about politicians in general. I'm no huge fan of most politicians regardless of political affiliation, but you got to call evil when you see it. And in particular, the things that have gone around in the Trump administration, post-Trump administration, his attempts to get back into the presidential seat. This guy should have cut his losses and moved on to begin with. And I don't really understand the fascination and need. I think it's kind of like the jaded lover kind of ideas. And that is that he just can't stand the fact that he lost. He's a sore loser. There's always been excuses around every corner. I wasn't happy about him initially becoming the president, but I also tried to take the advocation that Dave Chappelle took with SNL, and that is we need to give the guy a chance. As much as we all, think this is going to be gloom and doom and don't have a very positive outlook on where things are going, whatever the case is, we have to give the guy a chance because maybe some of it was political showmanship and this isn't exactly who he is. I mean, I think we all had a pretty good idea who the guy was to begin with. Yes, he had reality shows like The Apprentice that kind of gave us a peek into who he was, but some of those things are done for cameras. Some of those are staged or scripted, but Donald Trump's not a guy who's shied away from the limelight in general. Been on multiple news networks in the past, was a frequent drop-in of the Howard Stern show in particular over the years. I grew up in a Howard Stern household. My dad listened religiously for 15 plus years. He made the trek from terrestrial radio onto satellite radio whenever he got his deal with Sirius. And Donald Trump was, I think, unapologetically himself several times on that show. And while, some things were made, comments were made in jest, it gave you a peek into the guy. And so whenever I saw videos leak leading up to his 2016 campaign, such as the Billy Bush thing where they were on the tour bus and he's using what they called his locker room talk famously. I've been in a lot of locker rooms, and unless a joke was just made to just be ridiculous and over the top, and everybody in that circle knew that you weren't serious by your comments, but those comments were made seriously. Trump, more than just that occasion, made comments to that tune over the Miss Universe pageant and those sorts of things he talked about on the Howard Stern show, going into those rooms, underage girls, teenage girls. There's sound bites out there, folks. Just Google that shit. But I'm not going to beat of that dead horse in particular and get back onto present day issues. And that is, so they're charging Trump under the Riot Act in Georgia. Mark Meadows and Giuliani in particular are among the other 18 that are being charged, as well as, oddly enough, a PR person that represented not only Trump, but Kanye and R. Kelly. So, it's the company that you keep, right? 91 criminal charges total now to date against Trump. Now, I have a lot of friends that are kind of pessimistic about this whole deal, and they think that Trump's somehow going to evade everything. I'm really of the opinion at this point, 91 charges, that's pretty daunting. He's going to be going to 4 separate court cases here. I think actually this month in particular, some of those are going to start up, but he's all the way up until March of next year. Now there's going to be appeals and like the whole lawyer game, kick the can down the road and all that stuff that they do in the legal field, so I'm not here to like speculate on all of that. But 91 charges, it's going to be hard for me to believe that something isn't going to land in 91 charges. And especially you start talking about the years collectively that he would have to serve, even if just a small fraction of the charges land. There's some very serious offenses in here, and they're not to be taken lightly. I don't understand. On one hand, you have to tip your cap to the guy because somehow he's made people drink the Kool-Aid, and regardless of what he says and does, that is contradictory to his own maneuverings blatantly. His base remains his base, and there's something to be said about that. Is it redeeming? I mean, I guess you got to tip your cap to the guy in that sense. His loyal followers are his loyal followers, but what is the quality of that company that you keep? What is in that base? And we've done episodes in prior episodes, first season in particular, second season, where we've talked about some of those people in his base, the more boots on the ground stuff that we've observed. Missourians feel a little bit more safe in acting out and in professing their love for Trump in general, especially in the southeast sector of Missouri that we're located in. We get to see a lot of it day in and day out. And let me just say this. Trump does not give a shit about you. He doesn't, and most politicians don't give two shits about you. Could give zero fucks. They could give negative fucks about you. But Donald Trump is definitely a guy that comment is painted all over. He's a guy who was happy that COVID came along so he didn't have to shake poor people's hands anymore. I mean, think about that. Seriously, these are quotes directly from this man's mouth. Trump has 10 days to turn himself in from the DA there in Fulton County. There will be a mugshot. Now, I, for one, cannot wait for this mugshot. The reason being is because it's going to demean him in some way. By his perspective of things, that is. Obviously, not ideal to be getting a mugshot, right? Like, I don't think anybody aspires to that, or at least anybody with any sense. But it's definitely going to be a shot at the ego of a guy who has an overinflated sense of self as it is. So I can't be excited enough to see this mugshot. And I'm wondering if he's going to have one of his, like, smarmy, smirky little smirks on his face. I'm just curious, like, what approach is he going to take to the photo shoot, you know? But Trump, I guess the angle he's working now with this, of course, there always has to be an excuse. He's alleging that a document was uploaded to the Fulton County Courthouse's website, which rigged the jurors against him prior to the vote. A spokesman for the court called this reporting fictitious, which that reporting led back to Reuters initially, and Reuters reported that it was uploaded earlier in the same day that the ruling was coming out, but now has since walked back that reporting. Take that into consideration as well. So why would a news institution walk back their own reporting? Now, it's unusual that you would even see that now in the 24-hour news cycle because people's attention spans are often too short, and it's just like kind of on to the next thing usually. But Reuters has actually walked back their own reporting. You're not going to see that on Fox News. You're probably not going to see that on MSNBC. You're not going to see that on CNN. You know, it's about who has the information first. They want to blurt it out regardless of the accuracy, how many verified sources. There's a lot of that goes on because that's the nature of the 24-hour news network. They want viewers. They have to sell subscriptions. They have to sell advertising space. And so the more people, more eyeballs on their product, the higher that they can sell their ad spaces, you know, so on, so on, so on. The cyclical corporate cycle that news has become. News has special interest money in it constantly. It is hard to find unbiased news sources. My only encouragement to folks is to lay news sources against each other. Go and look at a left-leaning paper or a liberal paper and lay that against a conservative reporting on the same subject. Then try to find some middle ground reporting agency. I highly encourage folks in the U.S. to seek out things like Al Jazeera or BBC. Seek out news outlets outside of this country and see what their perspectives are about our political ongoings. I just can't advocate education enough when it comes to things like this. The big talking point, of course, with the boots on the ground stuff too, we have to mention, is a lot of Trump supporters are pointing to, it's always about whataboutism, right? You know, this shit goes back to Stalin's communism. This shit goes back to Hitler's SS and the neo-fascist movements over in Germany in World War II. A lot of what you see in the Trump template is neo-fascism worship. It is Stalin era borderline dictatorship, not even really. Yes, communism was the political roadmap, but Stalin was very much a dictator, killed, genocide, millions of people, his own people, because he couldn't support them financially, he couldn't feed them financially. He wiped out segments of his own country, his own people. He ran ethnic groups out into other countries, into India, for example. Trump and his administration and his approaches and his thoughts and his political motivations align more so with people like this. So, you know, they get up and they talk about socialism and they talk about communism and their political rallies, but they are literally employing the exact extreme bad examples led by fascists and or dictators. And that's what I see in Trump. And so we're engaging in this whataboutism, and the current day whataboutism relating back to this most recent charge with Trump is a lot of people are pointing to Stacey Abrams. Stacey Abrams, a middle-aged black woman in Georgia, facing enough discrimination as there is, whether that's publicly endorsed or not, or behind the scenes endorsed. Being a middle-aged black woman from the South, I'm sure is very challenging and daunting, and for her to put herself out in the public eye like she has enough is, I'm sure that she often contemplates career changes or wonders why she got into the career that she did, into politics, and has had some unsuccessful runs for political office. But the things that people are pointing back to Stacey Abrams is the fact that she had made it her mission as a part of some of her most recent campaigns was to rule out political corruptness, fight back against voter fraud, and all of these things that unfortunately are plaguing this country. And I wrap gerrymandering, redistricting into that conversation because it is a Republican 101 game plan, because they can't win. And this is how they began to win elections. And that's in particular, you've seen it in Missouri. I've detailed it on this podcast, how that's literally affected us locally, where they changed polling places within 2 weeks and people didn't know, and they sent out mailers. Like USPS is like the absolute slowest way to notify anything. There was no radio announcements. There was no, and even terrestrial radios become kind of outdated. There was no social media postings, anything like that about the redistricting or anything. It was a letter sent to the constituents of the area that they had to change their polling places. This is the type of shit that is in the GOP's game plan and playbook, and Trump is just another puppet in that wheelhouse. He's another cog in the machine. And again, I just don't understand how people can look at him and say, especially, you know, those evangelicals and those people like, you know, that tried to like tie a religious affiliation to all this. How is this guy the answer? How is this guy the second coming? Like this deity, the brush that he's being painted with. The QAnon quacks, they think that he is like the Messiah, you know? All these extreme movements, these groundswells that have taken place, people are taking QAnon theories. You know, I point to the Maui fires right now. You would not believe the shit that I've seen online, specifically targeting Jews, anti-Semitic bullshit with relation to the Maui fires. Like, how can you correlate those two things? And often it goes back to these wacky-ass conspiracy theories, particularly embedded in QAnon, with space lasers that are funded by the Jews, allegedly, and all this other stuff. And there's people that seriously think that a space laser started the fire in Maui, and the Jews control it. Like, I can't believe that this is, like, the stupidity that I have to address here. But this is my platform. This is what I do. I like to, you know, give that spotlight to artists that we feel like deserve an extra spotlight. And I did not mean the pun, because we have spotlights coming in a moment, of course. But also at the same time, and you know that we call that segment our guest spotlight segment, but we also like to put a spotlight on the corrupt. We like to put a spotlight on the wrongdoings in the world. And I've always been a firm believer, drag it out into sunlight. Drag these subhuman individuals out into the sunlight and let it expose them. Let it expose their evil deeds. Let it expose the bad things that they're doing. Let it expose the things that they're doing that are not in the interests, in our case, of the American people. This is how you get solutions to problems. This is how you stop cancers from spreading in our country. So I can't speak out enough against, obviously, all the things going on with Trump. I hope this motherfucker gets his. I hope that it's all very public and it's very humiliating. I hope it's death by 1,000 cuts in the sense that, you know, he gets everything that's coming to him. And it's important for the American people to see that nobody's above the law. The Republicans, the GOP, are this party that claims that they're a part of law and order, but whenever it applies to them, of course, here we go back to the hypocrisy, right? You know, whenever the law and order applies to them, well, then there's an excuse. They're out to get me. They're making this political, you know, so on and so on. Here's an idea. How about following the fucking law? How about being a decent human being? I'll make it even more basic than that. You know, the golden rule, like that's a thing, like treat others how you want to be treated. How about a little bit of that? How about that? So I think that's all I'm going to have to say on that today for our open. And I want to dedicate a large portion of our time to the program today to our guest, and that is Spotlights. Spotlights is Mario Quintero on guitar, vocals, and keys, Sarah Quintero on bass and vocals, and Chris Enriquez on drums. They are a three-piece. They're a power trio. The band released 4 full-length albums to date. That is Titles in 2016, Seismic in 2018, Love and Decay in 2019, as well as Alchemy for the Dead, their latest release, which we're going to lean into heavily on this episode and talk about. They've also have some EP offerings out there. They've been a part of compilations and tributes. And I know I just discovered these guys in I'll say like early winter, late fall of 2022. Late to the party, unfortunately. But fortunately, I've educated myself and caught up on their discography to date. And I hope that I will implore the rest of you to do the same, or encourage you to do the same. And of course, you know how we do. We're going to be hearing some spotlights in the break segments, clips going in and out of the interview today. And then stay tuned for the very end of the episode where you will hear a full-length song of spotlights as well. So stick around after the break for my interview with Chris and Mario from Spotlights. everybody, and welcome back to the ATI Podcast. We're on episode 83, and our very special guest this week is the band Spotlights. We have both Mario and Chris from Spotlights. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Good. How are you, man?
Howdy.
We're doing great. Guys, this is a huge pleasure for us. We're really big fans of you guys. I just recently come into discovering your music here in the last 9 months or so, shamefully. And boy, was I missing out, because you guys have got quite the catalog. Without question.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. Better late than never, anyway.
Hey, absolutely. So, just kind of a quick introduction to your band, kind of your guys' sound and that sort of thing, in the event that some of our listeners haven't listened to you guys yet. And shame on you, because I've been sharing their music constantly and links to their music. So, guys, check these folks out. Spotlights is amazing. But I would kind of simplify your sound, I guess, if I was to say it's kind of haunting yet serene, damning but angelic, nightmarish but dreamy. You guys have got a lot of soundscapes going on, and I think you cross multiple genres and platforms.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, whether it's on purpose or not, you know, we tend to like the dichotomy of like dark and light and heavy and pretty, etc., you know?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I know, like, one thing too right away that with your band that kind of drew me to you is kind of the production elements as well that you guys incorporate. And I know, Mario, you're wearing multiple hats. You recorded all of your most recent album in particular, but have you recorded all of your guys' music to date?
Yeah, I've played part in all of them. I've recorded and mixed and produced all of them, with the exception of Seismic, which was our second full length. Aaron Harris, the drummer from the band ISIS, recorded that record. I mixed it, but he recorded and produced it. We went to LA and got a proper studio for that one, and yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Aaron's one of the best in the business, man.
He is, man.
Love
He's
that
awesome. Dude.
Well, you know, it's funny that you bring up ISIS, because, you know, to hammer down a little bit more, if people don't get kind of some of my descriptors, you know, I think you guys, as far as genre-wise, you guys touch a little bit of the shoegaze, you guys touched a little bit of doom, you guys touch a little bit of post-metal, and then I guess a little bit of like what most folks would consider the masses, kind of like modern-day alternative rock. So, you know, listening to your guys' discography and your various songs over time, there's moments that sounded like, you know, Smashing Pumpkins, Siamese Dream era, almost shoegazy, and a more modern band like Nothing, I would say. When it comes to the doomy stuff, you guys got, you know, very doomy riffs, Sabbathy at times, but, you know, to use like a modern day example, I would say like there was moments that I was thinking of Torch listening to you guys.
Oh yeah, we love Torch.
They're one of the best. And, you know, of course, those post-metal vibes, I'd say there's a little touch of ISIS. Funny that we bring Aaron Harris up in particular.
Yeah.
And I would assume that you guys kind of have multiple influences coming in to this project in and of itself. What are some of the influences you guys would kind of consider some drivers?
Yeah, I mean, those are all, all those comparisons I take as a compliment, because they're all great bands. But yeah, I don't know, as far as like influences, Sarah always has a good way of describing us, which is, it's like if The Cure and Neurosis had a baby.
There you go.
I think that, to me, kind of encapsulates what we do. For me, I love both those bands, and it makes perfect sense. The Cure is probably my favorite band of all time, and as far as like the heavy stuff, you know, most of the bands in the modern day, at least in the post metal world, wouldn't exist without Neurosis. You know, so
absolutely,
I think they're the, you know, as far as that side of stuff, they're a big one. Melvins are a huge influence for us. You know, what do you got, Chris? Any?
You know, I think that two bands that Mario and I and Sarah also really like a lot are Helmet and Quicksand.
Oh, yeah.
Huge. Yeah.
So, you know, there's a bit of that in there as well.
Oh yeah, Helmet was definitely the only band I listened to probably from 1991 to 93 straight. It was just,
that's awesome,
nonstop. Yeah, strap
that's
it on
great.
in meantime.
I think I can definitely see that in you know, some of your guys' riffs and some of your songwriting too, influence wise. Quicksand's another one of my absolute favorite bands, and I can definitely see that there as well in the influences, without question. You know, too, with you recording everything, Mario, especially whenever you guys were things leading up to Alchemy, I
Yeah.
noticed you guys kind of did some video footage of the production and making of the album in particular. And something that I just stood out to me right away was the interplay between you and Chris and while you guys were actually recording the album. And it seemed like you guys were locked in on the same page, just kind of the approach you guys were taking with this most latest album and recording too, especially when it came to drums and how, you recorded like the toms and stuff and that separate from the cymbals, very
Right.
similar to the approach of like Queens of the Stone Age and things like that of the past.
Totally.
Was that the first time that you guys kind of took that approach with the recording process?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even with the writing process, I think the reason we seemed so much on the same page at that point, not that we aren't usually, but we did a lot of work beforehand. Like while we were writing, Chris and I collaborated a lot just on ideas and like sound ideas. Just, I would make a playlist and send it over, and he would like record beats and send it over. And we just were back and forth a lot with stuff like that. So by the time the songs were written and we were in the studio, we had a pretty clear-cut idea of what we wanted things to sound like. So it wasn't a ton of, even though we did a lot of experimenting, we
Sure.
had a goal in mind. So it was pretty easy to do. And yeah, I mean, doing the cymbals separate, something, being an engineer, and I know most engineers will agree with me, cymbals are the devil in the recording process. So like being able to have a drummer that can do that, first of all, and not take 2 days, 3 days per song to do it, makes it really easy, and it's a lot of fun because then you can really treat the drums however you like in the recording. You
Definitely.
can process them totally differently without the worry of the cymbals bleeding in through all the mics like they usually do.
Right.
So like things like compression and different types of EQ and saturation it's really hard to do those things unless you have the separation like that, or at least go aggressive with them, and without having
Sure.
to gate and chop and take all the noise out of every close mic you get. Like, and that's why people end up using samples a lot, because
Right.
they want that sound, but it's pretty hard to achieve when you have a ton of cymbals just washing into every single microphone.
Absolutely. Now, your guys' sound is something that I feel like you guys are always tinkering with from release to release. And, again, with this newest album, it seems like this might be like your most ambitious. You guys are kind of, that sound is being spread out across multiple genres in a concentrated dose, I feel like. And I have to pivot back to Chris on this in particular. And I think the thing that's most transformative about your guys' band as a whole with this newest album is Chris's drumming. And that is the fact that he's doing a little bit of everything. Not to say that he wasn't in the past. And I have a lot of appreciation for your drumming, Chris. And
Thank you.
because you are subtly awesome. And, like I'm a drummer primarily by trade as far as instruments that I play. And to be locked in the groove that you are in constantly, you're in the pocket and you just do very chill, subtle stuff that just enhances the overall presentation of the band and the music. But particularly, I think it stands out on this newest album.
Thank you very much. I think to touch on what you said earlier too, the collaboration certainly helped because Mario is a drummer, and we are in communication often about how things should sort of be held back or not, and there's a active conversation about that versus sort of taking chances. Not to say that there weren't some free-flowing things happening in the process, but I think things were mapped out and discussed. And what was really nice is how sometimes disagreements in the studio can sort of make more sense when they're coming out of the speakers once the guitars and everything are laid down. So I think I learned a lot from the process of making this record, and I feel like this one really has brought us a new audience. I don't think that was in our minds when we were doing it, but it's been noticeable on the road. There are people that, like yourself, that are saying they just heard about us, even though we've been a band for 7 years. So, it's really cool to see whatever we did on this one kind of resonated a little bit more to people outside of what we were catering to before that, I guess,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word.
No, totally.
Yeah,
I agree.
absolutely.
And I mean, like with the process with Chris, it was like we did this before when we did Love and Decay. It was way more stripped down the way we did things, but we were also in a very small space like this. It was just a practice space in Brooklyn instead. But that we didn't really have the time to like really dig into fills and stuff like that. But it is nice here. We were really able to like just like break the fills down and be like, okay, and I mean we can do the drummer talk pretty easily to just be like, no, more like a not instead.
Well, to also add to that, not to beat a dead horse on this topic, but I think one thing that should be mentioned is that we also connected on how some drum fills, even to a non-drummer or a non-musician in certain songs, are very memorable and catchy. And so some examples of that came up I'll give you one example. I don't think this was an influence, but everyone knows the drum part in Bloom by Nirvana. Whether you play drums or not, that part.
Totally.
So the idea, I guess, of that was something in our minds that we wanted to convey, that they would be memorable and not just to play or to do something
and
sick.
Not only with the drums, but just in general on this record, I think we tried to think of that like melodies. And I mean, I just think of that regularly anyway. Just I think because The Cure is such a big influence on me, and they that's like one of Robert Smith's biggest things is like every little melody and the beats, anything that's in that song is a piece that could stand on its own, and it's a little memorable piece.
Right.
And so like I love that approach to heavier music too, just because the groove can be a hook, the fills can be a hook, the bass line can be a hook, the guitar melody can be a hook, the riff can be a hook, so all those things without simplifying them, even they don't have to be just like dumbed down and simple necessarily. It's just we try and step back and be like, okay, if I was just hearing this as a listener,
right,
is it gonna grab me, not just as musicians being like, ooh, look how much I can fucking play, and
right. The musicality of the performance versus playing the right thing at the right time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's something that I over time have come to appreciate more and more, and obviously in my own playing and things like that, is the fact that you just because you can do it doesn't mean that you should always. You really need to be interactive with your surroundings, and I think that's another huge plus of your band. I mean, you guys being a power trio, I'm sure it's kind of helpful that you don't have as many people in the room, collaborating into one central focus of an idea per se, but the chemistry is just otherworldly that you guys have, and I've watched countless live performances, and every performance it's there. I think that there's perhaps some things, and I'm just going to make some assumptions, like as you guys have played over time, I think you guys have gotten more sure with yourselves and your sound and your ambitions, and your chemistry is built to where even like I think I caught some videos of yours, Mario, where you're kind of talking about how your approach to even your pedal setup has made things a little bit more simple for you and freed you up on stage.
Yeah, definitely.
Would you contribute that to be a huge factor, or just time? And
I think everything you together? Said, it's all of the above. Like just doing it, obviously, the more you do something, the better you get at it, the more comfortable you get. We've all been playing in bands for decades, but I think this band in particular has taken all of us personally to like another level, just because it's just a little. Well, first of all, we've toured a shitload, and I think just repetition always helps, so the shows get more comfortable. If I watch a show from 2016 compared to a show from last summer or this summer, it looks completely different to me. I felt just as confident back then, but I definitely was not, and wasn't as comfortable with the songs. So yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of repetition, I think, for me.
Yeah, I also think you probably can relate to this as a podcaster. Listening to yourself or watching yourself on camera or on a podcast, whether you're the interviewer or the person being interviewed, you can you learn a lot about yourself that you didn't pick up on in the first place. And that's very similar to playing music, because when you're sitting down at whatever instrument, whether it's a sound or the what can I do sort of mentality, the way that feels versus when you watch a video or listen to it on a recording can really transform how you think about it and help you grow into your best self and keep improving that way. I think it's a great way to stay aware and progress and feel like you actually have a better idea for the next thing and the next thing after,
Totally. And I mean, I think, like you said, gear too, obviously, with you develop your gear and what you actually need to make that performance better. Like you were probably talking about, I use the Helix, which you can kind of see in the background there.
Yes, sir.
And just getting that thing, I got the very first time I used it was in 2017, after the Deftones tour we did, and it changed my life right away. But the progression of just using the Helix by now, the way I'm using it has completely like opened up the live performance side for me, because I even have Ableton just switching my presets for me, or switching my snapshots for me on the Helix. And I can just worry about, I mean, there's still a lot I have to do with the feet, but not as, about 60% compared to what I used to have to do, or not even 30% what I used to do.
And you're doing a lot through the Helix specifically, Mario. I think you're like running a click track through there at various times. You're affecting your live vocal effects as well, and obviously your guitar. Man, that dude's a workhorse for you.
It is, man. It's become like the fourth member of the band, basically, because like you said, vocals. I run, any playback that we have runs through there as the interface, the audio interface. I send Chris the click track through there, and I have a lot of control of when we need it and when we don't. And like I said, now I have pedals being looped into it on buttons. It's controlling my H9 via MIDI. There's just there's so many things that thing is doing that it's got, sometimes I get a little worried because if that thing goes down, it kind of throws a big wrench in the show. I could probably do it. I know that, give me a distortion pedal and a delay pedal, and we can have a show.
Sure.
But you get used to certain things. It's even running the Helix isn't, but Ableton is running our lights now. Wow. I've gotten used to having those things kind of synced up to the show, to where now when we play a show where we don't have lights, it almost feels like empty. It feels a little.
Should have gotten a sponsorship from Yamaha for this one.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, right. Yamaha. I thought I was going to say there's a reason why I learned very quickly that this band was very appealing to gearheads, and including people at gear companies. If there's one thing I can confidently say about our fan base, that's one thing I can tell you about it.
A bunch of gear nerds.
A lot of gear people.
Yeah.
Which is funny.
Anytime I go to a live show, that's what I'm always at the stage before they even play. I'm like, what pedals we putting out? What are we doing to achieve this sound? Because I want to rob from somebody something.
That's funny though, because we really aren't big gear nerds ourselves. As much, even though I'm using all this technology, I don't really care too much about people get so stuck on is it the right amp or the right cable or the right, the quality of things, where I've always been like that, where I don't know, give me a 4-track and an acoustic, we'll make a record, whatever we have at our disposal. But we don't really get caught up. Chris is definitely not a drum gear nerd.
Not at all. And
Sarah definitely isn't. She loves her pedals, but she doesn't give a shit what company or what brand it is, as long as it sounds good.
Yeah, and I'm not ignorant of it. I'm aware that we are obviously using a lot of really cool things to get the sound that we're using, but I think what's interesting is sort of how separate that is from the way we are, how it's probably perceived, because I love drums, but I know a lot of people that obsess more about the equipment and videos and all sorts of stuff and technique, and to me it's more about
it's the sound,
coming up with a beat to
100%
a part so that it sounds cool, as opposed to really focusing so specifically on the whatever,
the price tag.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the approach to any instrument too, a lot of folks, a lot of people feel like, I know the big guitar lingo to use is like, um, it's not so much in the gear, but it's in the hands, for example.
Yeah.
And that the same is true for drummers though too.
Sure.
Let me say that too, because
I think probably more so for drummers than guitars. Because like you can throw a distortion pedal in a guitar and have a few different people play a power chord. It's probably going to sound exactly the same. But you give a guy a snare, 3 different people a snare drum and a stick,
right?
And every single one is going to sound different.
I have 2 people that I always think about when it comes to this topic, and it would be Johnny Ramone, because even though, just to kind of contrary to that a little bit, like it's a power chord, but the way he downstrokes, the way he does that is a little bit more aggressive than somebody doing the up and down stroke, kind of like loose. Right. It's very tight.
Totally.
And it's a very basic example of that. And I think, again, going back to Queens of Stone Age, like Dave Grohl, who played on Songs for the Deaf, when he hits a snare drum and a tom, it's just different. Dave Lombardo from Slayer hits a drum set. I just can tell that that's him hitting the drum. It's very distinct for some reason. I don't know why. Yeah.
No, I agree. There's a lot of thunder behind them hands for those 2 boys for sure.
Yeah. And it gives them their signature iconic sound, which is a huge goal for a lot of musicians, I think.
I 100% agree. Speaking of signature iconic sound, you guys are definitely carving your own path there. I feel like we've talked a little bit about the gear, but you guys tune and drop B, is that right, Mario? Is that the tuning that you guys
for the most part, that's kind of like our standard start. There's a few songs that have like a more dropped, where I drop the the E string down to F sharp, and then what would be my B string in standard tuning goes down to F sharp as well. So there's a lot of F sharp. There's like 3 different F sharps in there, and then we have a couple on the new record that go down to B flat. Just the quote unquote E string goes down to B flat, and and then I do the F sharp thing on the second string quite a bit too.
Very cool. I know that you too, Mario, have used several different types of guitars over time as well. I've seen you play some like tunable guitars, some SGs, Fender Strat as well.
Yeah.
Like when let's say you're running a live rig, are you taking all those guitars on tour with you and switching out, or kind of what's the approach there?
These days, really the only 2 I take are the Dunable and the Strat. They kind of they're definitely different. They play very differently, but they sound close to similar. Because the humbucker that I have in the Strat, it's a little more scooped out than the pickups in the Dunable, but they're both. It's kind of like just how I feel that day. If I'm like, I don't know, the Dunable's feeling a little too stiff, and I want to just kind of have a guitar that I can bend around and kind of. The Strat just feels a little freer to play. But that said, the Dunable feels like a tank, and it just really has like, I don't know, this like meat to it in the feeling of the playing sense. It's weird.
Looking at it right behind you.
Yeah, it's right over here.
Heck yeah.
But really those are my 2 guitars now. I do have a Pure Salem that I like a lot, and I was using that quite a bit. But it's also like the SGs that I used to play. It's a 24.5-inch scale, so it's for the super low tuned stuff. It just kind of can't hold it well.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound bad, and it's just tuning back up. I don't know. Just I can't. They don't stay in tune at that point.
Right.
I love the
you can spend a lot of time
SGs
tuning your guitar back up during a live set if it's going out on you like every song.
Yeah, exactly. Which happens anyway sometimes, just because of how we tend to go off on the instruments. But yeah.
Tell me how your guys' relationship with Ipecac started as well.
So that started in 2017. Yeah, I guess at the end of 2016. So after we put out Titles, which was our first album, we did a Deftones tour, and I had been writing a ton of stuff for our next record, which we had gotten in touch with Aaron Harris at that point. And we worked with Aaron in the past. Sarah and I had a band called Sleep Lady when we lived in San Diego, and he mixed one of our records. It's kind of how we met and became friends. And he's just awesome. I love working with him, and he's super chill and such a good dude. So we really wanted to work with him again, and we wanted to make this record with him, regardless of what label it would be on or whatever.
Mhm.
But when I had all the demos ready to go, we started sending them out, and he suggested Ipecac as well because ISIS had been on there. He had some sort of connection to it. So we sent to a bunch of different labels. Ipecac, Greg from Ipecac was basically the first one to get back, and he loved it. He was really into it, but wasn't sure about Mike being into it. And their pact for Ipecac is that they both have to love the band to sign a band. Yeah. So, when we heard that, we were like, oh man, I don't know. I can't really see Mike being into this stuff or whatever. And, but sure enough, the next day he wrote back and he was like, I love it. Let's do it. And since then, that's awesome. We've been there. Yeah. We're not going anywhere unless they make us leave.
Ipecac recording artists.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Mike Patton, that is a guy that's on my Mount Rushmore frontman in music. He is he can do everything.
He's incredible.
One of my favorites of all time since I was a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, and to get the brand and seal of approval from him in particular, that's got to be put a little wind in your sails.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean,
it's pretty wild.
Opening up for Bungle this a couple months back was a trip.
Yeah. Oh, man, I could imagine. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I guess maybe like the first time that I actually heard you guys' music technically was leading up to Alchemy of the Dead. So it was the Seance EP that you guys put out ahead of that, I guess. I mean, there's a few tracks there on both albums.
Yeah, right.
That is. And that came out about 6 weeks prior to Alchemy for the Dead. So Ipecac in particular, I set that up talking about Ipecac. It was, I follow them, of course, and I saw them sharing some of like the promotional and album making materials and stuff for you guys. I'm like, this is incredible immediately what I heard. And some of the early stuff I saw was interviews with Sarah and her talking about the approach to the songwriting on the album. And I was like, I'm really locked into what these guys are selling. And so I checked you guys out, immediately loved your music, realized you guys had, these multiple years of back catalog as well, and kind of went on that musical journey and discovered that you guys had all of these amazing sounds to your band.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely. Well deserved. And so, you guys releasing that EP, I'm just kind of curious, kind of like what the strategy was releasing that EP like 6 weeks out from the full length album. Can you kind of talk me through that?
So it was kind of like, I guess the approach to this album in every aspect for us was to do things differently than we have in the past or than people usually do. So from the production process to the songwriting to everything, we wanted to just push ourselves out of where we've been in the last few records. And even though I think the last few records had evolved a little bit, they're not exactly the same or anything, there was kind of a sound to them, and we really wanted to change that. So starting there, that was the mindset for the whole process of this new album. Therefore, when it came to the release of the record, me and Mark Shapiro, who works for Ipecac, he's kind of like their main guy. He basically runs the label. He's the boss basically, and he's amazing. Him and I were just brainstorming on ways to kind of just make it stand out in a different way, and not just release single album done.
Right.
So we came up with the idea of doing an EP. And I think it's something that a lot of bands used to do back in the day. They would do like singles and things like that, where it would be like 1 or 2 songs that are going to be on the record, and then a few other songs that will not be, like B-sides type of thing.
Sure.
I've always loved that too, because later on down the line, you find those things and you hear songs that you haven't heard because you only know the records. So that was kind of the idea behind that. So it gave us the chance to still release singles, kind of in the traditional these days manner, but have like a different aspect to it. And, we had, instead of waiting, we knew the vinyl was going to take forever, and we didn't really want to just wait for the vinyl for the music to come out because we had a tour coming up. So we decided to just, let's put it out as well. And, we had the documentary, which you've been kind of hinting at too, which our friend John Pope made for us, which he did an amazing job here in the same room.
Absolutely.
Just being a fly on the wall for weeks while we made the record. So there was just a lot of different little aspects to the release process that I think made it interesting. Even the way we we premiered the album, the full-length album, instead of getting like a magazine or an outlet to premiere it online. We just we did a live stream of it on Bandcamp. So we showed the documentary and we live streamed the album as kind of like a listening party. So you could buy a ticket and come listen to the record for the very first time before it's out, which that was really cool. And I think fans that did join that it felt really close, and we were all kind of like chatting on the chat, and it was really cool. It was something that I think we might just keep doing at this point because it was.
I loved that. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like it's for us, I think too, like we can kind of bend the rules and try different things. We're not some like, pop artist that's breaking out into the mainstream world. So why not try, we're trying something different musically. You can try something different, how we market and promote the thing. So, I didn't have anything to do with it, but I loved the ideas that these guys came up with, and I feel like it worked out. Obviously, with the amount of new people that have heard about us, I think something different has taken place. With this for sure.
You had a lot to do with it, Chris.
What's that?
Don't sell yourself short. You had a lot to do with
it. Yeah, and I, again, those promotional materials leading up to the album's release, to Alchemy of the Dead. What I liked too about the Seance EP approach, as well as the making of film, was that it kind of gave me the mood and the feelings of like, this was a really popular thing like in the 2000s where bands would do like a dual release. Like they would have a CD plus a like DVD, and then the DVD would be like a making of, or it would be the tour where they started revealing some of the new songs. So you could kind of see as the fans kind of got into the newer material and that sort of stuff too, to kind of help hype up the album. And it kind of like recaptured that feeling to me. And I think that's probably initially why I went down that rabbit hole checking you guys out and your extensive catalog too. So, I'm big on nostalgia type stuff. So, anything that kind of strikes a chord there.
I actually loved that back in the day. I would buy the new albums that had that, and I was always excited to pop it into my laptop and watch whatever behind the scenes footage they had. And those were fun. They used to have clickable chapters and things behind the scenes, studio, live, whatever, a couple of live songs. So, I feel you. It is similar. The way the rollout of that with the documentary, obviously physical is a little different versus, back in the day.
But I think, these days people worry so much about like, you have to have quick content for people because there's no attention span. And that might be true for, like Chris said, like pop artists, which I don't completely agree with that, but it might be true. I think the artists themselves can kind of run, they could just do it and people will still follow. But I think people's attention span, there's more than we give them credit for. And like, instead of just having a couple little clips on Instagram, having a little something that's more tangible and substantial brings you closer to the artist and brings us closer to the fans. And like, that was actually John's thought process doing the documentary, was that he wanted it to be something that would kind of resonate in a different way than just any regular like making of video. It wasn't just us like, hey, and this is Chris playing drums and this is the guitar part being played or whatever. But more something that would be like give you kind of an idea of who we are a little bit, and so I guess more intimate is what it is. Also, John would explain it way better than I can, but
like not to go on and on, but also like just doing something that you think is cool. If that resonates with anybody, then the people that are participating in your band's world in any way whatsoever, whether it's the people at the shows or buying the music or folks like yourself, it's kind of almost guaranteeing that you're all on the same page. They're on board. They're on board with what you decided to serve to them.
And I mean, cool. I think our whole goal of this band from the beginning has been to gain real fans, not just like clicks on Instagram. So like, for me, it's way more important to have one fan that is all in and loves us and loves the music and is interested in the story and the people. And versus just like, oh, this looks cool. They wear some dumb masks and click on it because it's like,
Yeah.
just
That's a thing.
I mean, yeah, it's a lot. It's a
Yeah.
thing, a lot of things, and not to hate on people who do that. That's fine too.
Sure.
But it's just for us. I feel like I'd rather know that the people who are engaging with us are there because of the music, number one,
Right.
and they tend to just stick with us a little more because of that, I think.
Yeah, you guys are kind of taking like a modern approach to a classic idea, essentially. And
Totally.
a lot of people nowadays, like they get to know, I guess fans get to know the bands through either, well, honestly, solely through their social media almost in most cases. And I suppose a person could do that through your guys' social media as well. But I think you guys are adding that extra layer, putting out the content like that you are. Another thing I thought added to a lot to your guys' personality as well was when you guys did like the quarantine covers too, and people got to take a peek into like some songs that you liked and how you approached them. Radiohead's one of my all-time favorite bands. I loved your guys' cover of
Thanks, man.
You're All I Need. It was incredible. I'm always a sucker for a good cover. And whenever a band can pay enough tribute to the original material that it's recognizable, but then make it all their own, is like the perfect marriage of a good cover in my book. And you guys definitely achieve that with that work.
Same. Yeah, I mean, I think I like the approach for us is approach it as fans. Like, what would we want to hear? What would we want to hear this cover sound like? So yeah, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And you guys did kind of the same thing with the Pixies track too, Wave of Mutilation, which Pixies, they were kind of a bucket list band for me to see. And I was supposed to go see them, and the tour got canceled because of COVID in 2021. So it sucks. And they didn't renew their, they didn't come back to St. Louis. I had tickets. So it's a bummer. Hopefully I'll catch them eventually.
Yeah, they're awesome, man. I didn't get to see them until the last 5-6 years. I forget when it was that I got to see them in Brooklyn, but it's if you get a chance, even if you have to travel a little bit, I'd say it's worth doing still.
I feel like I'm rubbing it in, but I think I'm seeing them in a few weeks. Sorry, guys.
How dare you? Well, we'll have to live vicariously.
The guy that stays in Brooklyn always gets the good shows.
Should tell you just a fun, quick story. But I through a mutual friend was able to get that cover to be played for Joey Santiago of the Pixies.
Very
and there's a video of him listening to it where he turns around and goes, "I think these guys have a shot at making it." And then several months later, that same friend of mine called me and said, "What are you doing?" I'm meeting Joey, and they're playing tonight. And so I got to hang out with him and his whole family after the show, and then
incredible.
And talked.
He said he wasn't going to rub it in, and then he starts telling this story.
It was kind of wild. I mean, that was kind of crazy, like a crazy thing to have happen. Like, it was just a couple of weeks after that cover was released.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, quick sidebar while I got you too, and it was a pleasure that you hopped on here too at the last minute. I know you do some drumming for Julie Christmas, which is on my Mount Rushmore of women front people in music, made out of babies and all of her various projects that she's had over the years. Just an incredible artist. How did you get that opportunity to do some drumming for her?
Thank you for asking about that. Yeah, she's wonderful. Andrew Schneider, who is the bass player for Julie and recorded a bunch of her material. He is a recording engineer that I've worked with in the past. And when it came time that she wanted to start playing as a solo artist again, I got a call from him to learn a few songs and try out. So, that's how I ended up playing with her. And it's been a great experience so far.
That's awesome. Yeah, Battle of Mice, her work with Colta Luna. I mean, I could go on and on. Huge fan of everything that she does. And that's an awesome opportunity that you've gotten there. That's for sure.
Thank you so much. We got a new single out. So I don't know if you heard it, but it's up on streaming.
Yes, it is fantastic. And again, can't compliment your drumming enough. I just think you know exactly what to do to accentuate every musical piece and the approach that you take to your drumming, Chris. So I can't tip my cap to you enough.
That means a lot, man. Thank you so much, from drummer to drummer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
So I want to get back into Alchemy of the Dead because I want to detail kind of for our listeners, regardless of what type of music you like. I think if you haven't heard Spotlights, there's something there for you, especially with their latest offering, Alchemy of the Dead. They released it at the end of April. It's got 9 tracks. It's a quick 48-minute listen. And the reason I say quick is because of the variety that we've been kind of detailing in their sound. And I'll detail some of that in some of my listening experiences, some of my first reactions. So, the album kicks off with Beyond the Broken Sky, and right away, the vocal approach and the instrumentation just made me think of No Quarter by Led Zeppelin, which to me is an all-time favorite track of mine. And I don't know if that's an inspiration in any way or whatever, but then midway through.
Yeah, now hearing you say that, it makes sense, but it wasn't in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Wasn't methodical anyways.
Right. That song was actually written in 2014, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just been hanging around on the hard drive and never really made it onto a record until this time.
Well, that halfway into that track, you guys kick into a killer Sabbathy riff, just doomy as hell too.
Nice.
Which that hooked me right away. I like to listen to albums from start to finish. I mean, yeah, obviously bands put out singles in advance and you listen to those, but again, it's back to those nostalgia feels. I go back to my days of being, like 10 years old in the mid 90s and listening to, CDs from start to finish with the album art out and reading the thanks and the liner notes and all that stuff and the lyrics. And it kind of helps capture that because I think people miss out a lot of stuff that's not singles or B-sides, if you will.
Yeah.
In a band's catalog. And some of my favorite songs sometimes are like what people would consider B-sides in a band's catalog. And you're missing like really good moments for yourself. So I can't encourage folks enough to do that in general. So that was a quick little sidebar on that piece, but my PSA for today. But then it goes into The Alchemist and the drum and the mix of the song, the drums and the mix of the song all together. I was getting kind of a lo-fi, almost a trip hop feel to it initially. And I was like, boy, this is taking some very interesting turns the first time I heard that song as well. With you guys, and then the droniness of the bass, and then just those epic guitar bends that are going on. I think there's a lot that goes on in that song that you don't expect coming, but when it does hit you, it's a surprise, but in a good way.
Right.
Yeah, and also, I love when people say that because we did talk about ideas during the precursor to the album, in particular drum beats, and we did send each other ideas that were purposely outside of the box in terms of the genres that we kind of cross-pollinate with and have a history with. So trip hop is something that is a huge part of my DNA that I don't think I ever imagined would make its way into a band that I was ever in. So, that was super cool for me to just like be on the same page with Mario and Sarah where that did seep in. And I don't know if that is how Mario feels about the aspect of that genre that sort of
definitely. I mean, I think that song was one of the first songs that it actually was the very first song that you and I played together when you flew out to right when we were kind of just like trying stuff out.
Yeah.
And I mean, right off the bat, my thought was like kind of a hip hoppy vibe, Portishead sounding type thing, and
definitely,
shamelessly just went straight for that. So.
Yeah, I mean, just like drop a couple other ones too. Like I grew up listening to a lot of Sneaker Pimps and Massive Attack, and Bjork and Portishead. So but there was never a moment when I was listening to that where I ever thought that there would be a band that that would have any of that in it. So it was just really cool to be able to inject that into what we just did.
Yeah, I mean, to me, and if you do go back and listen to all of our stuff, especially old stuff, our very first release that's out on Bandcamp only, or no, I guess it's on Spotify and all that stuff. The Demonstration, which is just like a demo that we put out, has I think 5 songs on it. The production on that is super bare bones, and we just did it in our practice space, Sarah and I, when we were very first starting the band. But a lot of this new stuff goes back to kind of what we were doing back then, which was a lot more electronic based. And then even around that time, we put out a song called Box of Talking Heads, which is primarily all electronic beats and very much along the same lines as what we're talking about, like all these bands, really. So it's always been there. I think now it just came out in a way that's more obvious and maybe more, I don't know. Just
Sure. Yeah.
Definitely. It's funny that you mentioned the Portishead piece of it too, because I felt like there was some of those vibes with Sunset Burial, how it kind of starts out. It's got kind of that macabre feel. Also, like Crosses came to mind for me in particular. And just that really gnarled, like fuzzed out tone that you get, Mario, about 2/3 of the way in whenever you come in. The whole band's real full. Like immediately that made me think of like almost like Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age, like fuzz tone when that kicks in. And I was like, God damn, these boys are just, and ladies are really mixing it up on this album. Just like three tracks in, I was like, holy hell, like this is insanity already.
I love that. That's awesome. I mean, I think that's like the challenge. What keeps things interesting for me personally, at least as a musician, is to like take all the things that you love and try to make them work together without it being like, here's the trip hop part, here's the heavy part, here's the, you know, blending it into something that's its own thing as a whole, not just you know, pieces of influences, you know, where it's like super obvious. But
well, if you're looking at it from like pieces of influence too, the cohesion in the music doesn't translate, and I think that's kind of obvious that that's not like necessarily your guys' perspective or approach either,
right?
Because I don't think that kind of like the synergy in your music, we'll use a present day corporate term, would be as evident, right?
Right.
So False Gods too, I loved a lot. Great name, by the way, for a song.
Thanks, man.
What I really noticed right away too, of course, was kind of the sax and the drum intro, and then bass kicks in, then guitar. The kind of the sax interplay with the heavy bass tone automatically made my mind went to like Loved, Ken Mode's album before last that they put out. I guess they're technically getting ready to put out another one here in September.
Nice.
But when I first heard them do that, I would have never been like, okay, let's add a saxophone to a hardcore band. But ever since hearing it, I'm like, why don't more bands do this?
Yeah.
And then for that to pop up on your guys' album, I was like, holy hell, these guys are definitely locking into some different vibes with this album and really pushing themselves musically and artistically.
Nice.
That's a great record, by the way. I like that record. Andrew Schneider produced that one.
Nice. I haven't actually heard that record. I gotta listen to it because I saw them live once, I think, like 2015 or something like that. Like, so it was a long time ago at St. Vitus.
Yeah.
And they blew me away, but I just haven't kept up. I'm a terrible music listener. I really don't listen to much music, but I should.
Well, I mean, when you're writing your own music, but also I know, Mario, you record music too, so that's a whole different animal in and of itself and a huge time consumer. So it's hard for you to go out and listen to new stuff.
After 8 hours of mixing music, I'm usually not ready to go listen to music.
I can vouch for that. Mario definitely does not. I listen to music all day long. Mario definitely does not as much.
Yeah.
I do love it. It's just, you know.
Sure.
But I, as far as the sax on False Gods, for me, what really brought it out to, I mean, I've loved horns. I've studied jazz for a long time, and during COVID, I was kind of getting back into that a lot and practicing guitar and getting all my jazz stuff back and all the theory back. And so I was listening to a ton of like Coltrane and Eric Dolphy and like weirder stuff that's more like sax, or, you know, he played bass clarinet, but and so that was kind of in my head. I just wanted to have something with horns in it, but when we had that song, what really brought me back to it was more like an 80s approach to it, like almost like, I don't know, I can't really pinpoint a part, but there's like, so many bands.
Who Can It Be
Sexy
Now?
Saxophone Man?
I mean, yeah, totally.
No, what's that? Men at Is that
Men at Work?
Men at Work.
Yeah, totally.
No,
that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And there's like this delay. The Cure had a lot of sax in it. There's one of my favorite things in music, and it's a part of a Police song. I think it's Ghosts in a Material World, Spirits in a Material World. It's the craziest thing, because at the very beginning of that song, there's one little sax fill, and then there's no saxophone in the rest of the song. And that's always blown me away, where I'm like, they just were like, just leave that little piece in, that's perfect. And then the rest is like nothing. I don't know. So for some reason, like those things were the ones that like made me want to have sax on it. And luckily we found Ben Opie here in Pittsburgh, who just crushed it. And like he was in the room maybe for 10 minutes, like no preparation, just heard the song and then destroyed it. Yeah,
those jazz cats are different animals, man.
Total
question.
pro. Yep.
Yeah. It was without it too. I think it made the song, because without it, it's kind of got elements of other things that we've dabbled with, and a bit of to me, there's a Godflesh kind of vibe with like the bass and drum interplay. Maybe not so much the vocals, but then when you throw the sax in, it's kind of takes it into a different place.
Almost like morphine too, like kind of like a morphine sound,
Yeah, definitely. Well, I wanted to bring up another example on the most recent record, Alchemy of the Dead, again, or For the Dead, excuse me, again. And Crawling Toward was a song that right away, immediately, I was like, this has got some My Bloody Valentine vibes. Now, I will say kind of how you approach your vocals in general, Mario, is your vocals are usually kind of typically behind the mix, which is kind of like stereotypical for production on like shoegaze albums. And I mean, other artists do it, other genres do it, but I'd say it's more prominently in that realm.
Right.
Which always fascinates me because I think it piques the listener's curiosity in the sense to try and discover as to more what's going on there. That's just my personal take on it. That's the way it's always intrigued me, that approach. But man, there was actually like a tinge of like Mew in there too for me.
Yeah, I mean,
I was like, I kind of drew that comparison there too a little bit. But again, I wanted to just like highlight that example because it's showcasing the variety that you guys are bringing on this album.
Yeah, Mew is, especially for Sarah and I know Chris loves Mew too, but Mew is like one of our very all-time favorite bands as well. And I mean, I'm not ashamed to say that Crawling Toward the Light is basically a Mew ripoff, because cool. Which is fine. But yeah, that song definitely lands into Mew territory. Which again, if you go back and listen to our very, very early stuff, you'll hear a lot more of that shining through, I think.
Absolutely. Now, I say all that to say this as well. This album is going to be on a lot of people's greatest albums of the year list. Those year-end lists that people get. I guarantee you. I saw you guys already getting some love on some mid-year lists across various, institutions. But I think that you guys are going to appeal to even more fans, and I hope this, newest album obviously brings you as much new fans and success.
Thanks.
I wanted to hit on too. You guys have been so generous with your time. The fact that you guys had the opportunity to do the Super Unknown Redux, and you guys did the cover of Black Hole Sun specifically for that compilation, right? How did that come together?
Yep. So Jad from Blues Funeral Records and Magnetic Eye, he's part in both of those record labels. He's awesome, and we did an EP in 2020 that's called We're All Atomic. That came out on Blues Funeral. So we've had a relationship with him, and he just approached us about doing the cover for that record and the second Redux that they did too. And I mean, it was just a no-brainer. It seemed like something like an awesome opportunity to again approach a cover in whatever way we could. I think that one in particular, maybe we took a little less liberties creatively, and maybe stuck a little more to like the song itself, and just imprinted what we do onto it. But it was fun. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
You guys also did Jesus Christ Pose too, right?
Yeah. Now that one we definitely changed it up on quite
definitely.
a bit.
I had a great time on that one. That was a lot of fun. We did that remotely, and I was trying to kind of like do again, like I don't know if I would call it trip hop, but it was definitely
almost like what do you call it, like jungle beat.
Right. I was gonna thank you. That's another thing I was really into growing up was jungle. These like mixtapes that I would pick up, and Mario had expressed an idea to me to try and encapsulate a drum beat of that nature and loop it without me necessarily even knowing what he was going to do with it. So I live in New York and they live in Pittsburgh. So I recorded this drum beat at a studio out in Brooklyn, sent it to Mario, and then he was interesting.
I think I just gave you a tempo. I was like, just do it to this tempo.
And now I'm remembering. So he said, he told me, play to this tempo, play this kind of beat. I did that. And then he said, do
like go nuts for one of them.
Yeah, go nuts for one of them.
Yeah.
Keep one of them kind of like the same. And then what you have is a blend of the two. And I honestly wasn't playing with anything in mind. I was playing alone with no music.
Wow.
So that's how that came together.
Yeah, that was an interesting
Very
one.
cool. Very cool. Yeah, that very
more
different
like,
approach.
Yeah, it was like play this for 5 minutes with no music at all to this tempo and send it to me. So that
it worked out way better. I think it worked out better than if I was in the room with him doing it, and if we had the song already hashed out, because it dictated a lot of what we ended up doing with the song to begin with. Just having that, whatever he did, there's parts where he's kind of like doing some crazy tom work that almost sounds like it's in an odd time signature, but it's not. A lot of that stuff, I would have probably been like, no, that's too much, and then we would have, simplified that or something. And
have you ever seen 24-Hour Party People or any of?
Yes.
I was thinking about that when I was doing it, like the crazy parts where they're like stressed out and running around, and it's like, which is basically me walking around my neighborhood. So I just that drum beat kind of felt like that.
Yeah. I can see that for sure.
It was kind of an experiment, but I'm glad we did it, and I don't know how the doom metal fans are taking it, but hopefully they like it too.
They'll get with the times.
That's right.
Now, I know you guys have done a lot of touring, maybe not like in the traditional sense that people think, like in the last year, like you go out on a date and you're on the road for 45 days straight or whatever the case is. But I know you guys have done some of that too. I know you guys have kind of taken more geographical, like isolated approaches, like you'll do the East Coast or you'll do the South or Southwest, or like you guys did a Canada run not too long ago. How's the last year on the road treated you guys?
It's been awesome. Yeah, it's been nice to, because the way you're talking about of doing more like regional jumps is really only at post-COVID. Before that, before COVID, we were doing pretty much full U.S. tours, or we toured with the Melvins for 3 months straight. Basically, did 80 shows in a row.
Wow.
All of Canada, all of the U.S., back and forth, maybe 3 or 4 times through the United States, and we were doing just a lot of big tours. But then after COVID, things were a little weirder. We did more like a week here, a week there. So it was really nice now to get back, having a new album, to be able to do a full 2 months again and just hit everywhere as much as we can. At least we had to skip a few cities just because it's sometimes it doesn't work out. But and then Canada, unfortunately, we could only do again like just Eastern Canada and one show in Western Canada, but we try to get out as much as we can. It's been, this last year has been great. Like Chris has been saying, tons of new fans, different types of fans, young, which is awesome for us because it's not just a bunch of bearded old guys anymore. There's a bunch
who we love.
We love them all. No, I mean, they're our favorite.
Most of our friends are those guys.
It's nice to see more diversity in our crowds now, and it was surprising to us every night. We'd be like, oh my God, there was like just all types of people there, and all
the diversity
ages, it was awesome.
Up. I mean, way more women, way more younger people, and it felt like maybe they thought this was our first album. That's just how I felt sometimes. Like, which is a great feeling. That's actually, for me, that's like
new fans are the best fans, because they're there and they made it, so it's awesome.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I might have like kind of thought the same thing again with just like the marketing vehicle. It seemed like you guys kind of had behind you. I don't know if like you guys had that much energy behind you with other releases in the past. It seems like you guys casted a wider net with this release in particular. So I think that's definitely contributing to what you guys are seeing, boots on the ground.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it was my favorite so far for us. I mean,
great shows.
We've been doing it a lot, so it's like this was the first time I think where we were showing up to places also, and I'm really surprised because maybe it had doubled since the last time we were at some of the same spots, and Toronto and Montreal were like, what's this going to be like? And then we showed up and it was fantastic. And there was a lot of places that we've been going to the same exact place, and then it was better this time than the last time, and the last time before that.
Very cool. I got to ask too, how was it to tour with the Melvins? I mean, I know you guys did a lot of dates, but man, I know that's an influence, or at least you're fans of the Melvins in particular, from what I've seen in previous interviews.
It's amazing, man. They're they're like a desert island touring partner, I think, because
very cool.
We've learned endless amounts from them about how to tour, how to be a sustainable band, what you really need, what you really don't need. And everything, details about, hotels and where to park and how to be smart about all kinds of things. Like, it seems funny, but those things are really important for the business side of being a band and for the longevity side of being a band. So aside from us being huge fans of theirs and just getting to watch them every night and just get your face blown off by them, we've not only gotten to share the stage with them, but literally shared the stage with them. Sarah and I, on the long tour we did for about, 55, 60 of those shows, got to play their last song with them on stage, which was really cool. It's one of those surreal things where you're like, I'm playing Lysol with the Melvins right now.
That's incredible.
And then on this last tour with Bungle, Sarah was playing Night Goat with them as well, with Trevor Dunn, Steve McDonald, and Sarah on bass, 3 basses at once.
Wow.
So that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, incredible. I mean, it doesn't get lost on you that you're out with, legendary, iconic dudes who are, at the end of the day, just regular human beings, but, to have the history that they have, and the, just the catalog and the innovation, and just to sit there and watch each of them play their instruments and all the things Mario said to take away from, on a non-musical level, to take knowledge from them. And I've heard you say this before, it's like going to school or, going to college, like you don't really get the opportunity. I mean, I feel like Fugazi is probably the only other band that I can think of that I love that had a similar sort of work ethic and maybe a similar behind the scenes way of doing business. So to actually just be there versus hear about it and then leave a venue and put that into your band is a very incredible thing to be gifted with,
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah,
and
they're good. Master class.
It really is. And they're amazing humans too. Like, they're just good people and kind and thoughtful and generous and like I can't say enough good things about touring with those guys.
I mean, just to wrap that up too, like I was going to say, like, it's not every day. I mean, you could go on tour with your favorite band. Like, are they going to actually sit down and sort of spend that time with you?
Hang with you? Are you going to watch baseball with them?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And now I know you guys have some other shows in the future. I think I saw a date you guys have coming up Thanksgiving weekend, possibly in Ohio with Baroness and Soul Glow. Is that right?
Yeah, that's part of a longer stretch that we're doing with them. Those shows are all announced, but our part isn't fully announced. Whatever. If people find out, that's great because they're going to find out anyway. But we're doing from November 14th to the 26th with them.
Okay.
Which is going to be awesome. Yeah.
You just leaked it, bro.
I'm sorry.
We leaked the info.
Leaked it on Twitch, man.
So get your tickets.
Hey, blame Spotify, because actually whenever I was listening to your guys' catalog, it always tells me if a band that I'm subscribed to and I like them, if it has an upcoming show, and I got a notification that you guys are in Ohio, and I'm like, it seems weird that they just have this one date on
I know,
here.
no.
That's
so
the
it's
only
going to
date
be
that's on there.
part of a 2-week run there, and then we're going to finish it off with a couple headline shows too that should be announced in the next couple weeks probably.
Well, Baroness is amazing. I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy your time on the road with them.
We can't wait.
Soul Glow is one of my newer favorite bands too. So
that's awesome. I got to check them out. I've never heard them.
Yeah, I really like the new record.
Nice.
Yeah, the one they put out last year. Yeah, last year.
Epitaph.
Yep, that was one of my favorite releases.
Yeah, we'll be playing one show with Chat Pile too. That's going to be
cool. A couple shows with Chat Pile, a couple shows with Vile Creature, and a couple shows with Soul Glow. Yeah, it's like kind of they have a lot of changing support throughout this whole tour that they're doing.
Chat file's incredible too.
Yeah,
that's exciting too because it's a diverse array of like a lot of like whatever
Definitely.
modern artists. So it only
a lot of variety too. So it's not just three of the same band playing every night.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, Chat Pile's a band too that I feel like kind of has a little bit of a throwback sound to them in the sense of like their influences are kind of evident. Like they almost sound like people who haven't heard of them that I recommend them to. I'm like, if you like the drum, like the mixing approach to like maybe like Godflesh, but you like old Korn riffs, like you might like these guys. And usually people are kind of off-put by that. Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely Jesus Lizard too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I usually gauge the temperature of the room with that comment and see where that takes the conversation.
Yeah, we never met them or seen them, but I think I played it a few times in the van, and at some of the venues we played at, it was playing on the speakers, and it's a really good record.
Yeah, God's Country definitely blew them up last year. So, gentlemen, you guys have been so giving with your time. I just want to ask you a few quick hit rando questions on our way out so our audience gets to know you guys, your personality a little bit better. We'll mix it up a little bit. Some of it will be music related. Some of it will not be music related. Are you all ready to play this game with me?
Let's do it.
All right, awesome.
Oh, yeah.
So let's start with, if money is no object, what is a dream piece of gear or equipment for each of you?
You go first. I have to think.
Come on, man. If money is no object, I see what you're saying.
It's like a dream piece of gear.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And it could be like John Bonham's kit or something like that too.
Right,
like it could be very specific. It doesn't necessarily have to be like I want a Ludwig acrylic set.
Sure.
Whatever.
Gosh. Okay. Well, I guess you kind of said it. I probably would want one of Bonham's kits. I don't know if it would be the acrylic kit or his wood kit, but the reason why I would probably want that, I would say like whatever he played on Fool in the Rain on that album, because of how imitated the sound that he had was. So I've always had a curiosity, not just about his kit, but like a lot of those drummers, of what it would sound like today if I had it in a room in this studio, for example, or if I was playing it live, because we're so used to hearing those bands and those pieces of equipment in vintage, with vintage microphones and whatever, So I would like to hear that in a modern setting. So I would say the drum set that John Bonham played on Fool in the Rain.
He kind of fed that one to you. But
you did feed that to me.
Hey, it's the drummer thing, man.
It is.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. I don't know if I can go with one answer in particular, but I'll try. So I'll go, let's say, as a guitar player, I'm just, like I told you, I'm not a big gearhead, but I think one thing I would love to have is like a custom electrical guitar company guitar. If I could sit down with, what's his name, Kevin, I think is the owner, and design something and not have to pay for it, that would be incredible.
Yeah.
Or pay for it and it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't hurt my bank account.
I think isn't
that
what Steve has from Torch? I think he has an electrical guitar.
I think he has one of those. Yeah, he has I mean, they're awesome. I've kind of played with the idea of getting one in the past, but I ended up with the Dunnable, which I also love just as much. But
I've heard good stuff about the Dunnable stuff.
Yeah, they're incredible, man. I can't recommend them enough. But the electricals, I played on Seismic. I got a chance to use Cliff from Ice's his electrical baritone. So like on a few of those songs, I got to play that guitar, and it's just like, man, there's something to how those guitars play. Every note just feels like it's like a chiming piano. It's no matter where on the neck you are, it felt. And this was one of the aluminum neck ones.
Yeah,
it was just incredible. Yeah.
There's a percussiveness that comes with the way those guitars are built that is just kind of like hard to replicate for sure.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna take a recording version of that, and let's see. I'm gonna take two. I'm going for it here.
Go for it.
Let's. I would take like an old Neve 1073 console.
Okay.
Console with 1073 preamps and EQs in it. That would be nice. And then maybe just like an original Telefunken 251. That's all I would ask for. The rest
Okay.
I don't care. I'll fit 57s and Behringer shit. It works
Okay.
just fine.
Very cool.
Can I just add to that too?
Go for
it. For me, it would probably be what I said earlier, or I'm really, really fascinated by Alex Van Halen's drum set.
Yeah.
It just there's not a single drum set that sounds like that at all. I mean,
No.
it's just weird, and I would want to sit down and play that thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Now you would have to talk about what era of Alex Van Halen though too, because they had that 80s era of the Van Hagar stuff where there was a little electro mixed in kit stuff. I would assume you're all percussive, right?
Percussive. I wouldn't even go like with early. I'm talking like Jump era.
Okay.
It's just like a really
1984.
Like, not even like oh my god, what is the Drop C song that's like so fucking good? Anyway, so mid era 80s with Roth.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's where it's at. If you guys could meet anybody from any period of time, who would it be and why? It could be a historical figure, musician, whatever.
God,
you gotta go first.
Anybody from any period of time, that's really something. Oh man,
we're talking about musicians, so that's really tough.
Yeah, that made it much harder because I'm still holding out to meet Robert Smith. I think it's just one of those bucket list things. I would love to just meet him and just say thank you. Damn, somebody.
I mean, if I was going to say a musician, it's super generic, but Kurt Cobain. But I kind of wanted to sound a little bit more worldly than just shouting out a musician, because there's so much other stuff in the world. Like I could have said like Malcolm X or something.
Yeah,
sure.
I'd like to meet Alan Watts too. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I just thought that too. That would be a nice. I'd like to have a chat. Just like sit down and listen to that guy talk in person.
Okay. Very, very cool selections. Let's talk Mount Rushmore of artists that you would like to tour with. But I want somebody that you haven't toured with yet. So let's say like maybe a bucket list of artists you'd like to tour with. Let's make 4 selections.
4.
Each? So 2 and 2?
Yeah, well, you guys can make 4 each if you'd like. Okay, I'm sure that there's some on Chris's list that aren't on Mario's, but there might be some crossover.
That's true. I can start, I guess. I'm super redundant every time people ask me this, but The Cure would be one of my goals to tour with, even though it would be an odd pairing maybe at this point, but maybe not. And then another one that I wish this would be like an amazing bucket list for me would be Jane's Addiction. I mean, I would do it nowadays, but if like, early 90s, late 80s Jane's Addiction, I would kill to be on tour, or just to see that would be enough.
Sure.
But yeah, Jane's Addiction would be a huge one for me.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 more.
Oh, 2 more. Damn. You do 2, and I'll think of another 2.
I'm just gonna get this out of the way and sound like a cheese ball, but Foo Fighters, because I am a huge fan. But I feel like a band like that in 2023 is really kind of carrying a torch that maybe was carried by a lot of bands back in the it goes like I see a show like that, or like Guns N' Roses, who I've seen recently. I feel like I'm at like a Led Zeppelin concert, or to bring it back to that, or like a Sabbath show, like who I've seen their last tour. But it's like that's a cool experience, and they've done a great job of curating openers.
Definitely.
So them and Queens of Stone Age for sure, who I just saw.
Definitely.
And The Cure. So that's 3 for me. I'll save my last one while you tell them the other ones.
So I just saw Gojira play for the first time
Nice.
last week, and it fucking blew my head off, man. Like one of the best shows I've ever seen. Such a good band in so many ways, not only just musically, but like production wise. The whole thing was just insane. So I'm going to put them on the list because I think that would be a great tour, and I would love to do that. And it's almost possible.
I don't think that like enough people give them their flowers, man. They are just so good in so many aspects.
Dude, so good.
Yeah.
And then, oh man, it's really tough. I would say Mew as my last one. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
Okay. This is tough for me. I'm going with my last one here, but I am going to say
We're really dragging this out.
I'm going to say Bjork.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Very nice choice.
That would be incredible.
Back to that, like my personal Mount Rushmore of like female artists, I'd said Julie Christmas is definitely on there, and Bjork's on there as well, without question.
Oh man, she's at the top. Yeah.
She's also definitely a fan.
Yeah, we did a Women's Month curated in July where we talked about some of our favorite women's musicians, and both Julie Christmas and Bjork was on my list of women's musicians in particular. So,
the day that these guys wanted to give me a copy of their first album to learn the music, but when I was starting to play with them, we met up at a bar close to Rough Trade, the record store in Brooklyn at the time.
Oh, and, us? I thought you were talking about Julie Christmas.
No, me and Mario and Sarah were meeting up with each other, and so I didn't know that Mario and Sarah were just at Rough Trade, and Sarah bumped into Bjork.
Yep.
And,
oh wow!
And
I wasn't there.
You weren't there. Sarah was there and bumped into Bjork. She left. I walked in at some point, like shortly after, and the people at the cash register were freaking out and told me that Bjork was in there. And then I met Mario and Sarah to sit down, and then we had that shared sort of shared experience, but Sarah actually saw her, bumped into her, whatever, something. Well, she saw her at least. I don't know if she spoke to her.
Yeah, she
okay, there you go.
Fanned out a little bit.
Yeah, I missed her.
Sure.
I mean, come on, it's
sure.
Bjork.
Yeah. I mean, I've had more embarrassing moments in front of artists that I really love. You know, like the first time I met Ben Kohler, I was just like, I like you. You know, I kind of marked out on myself. So. But I
played drums every night on tour with Mutoid Man a while back, and I definitely didn't feel like feel great about myself watching him every night.
He's incredible.
Different type of machine. Yeah.
He's built different. Yeah, he's automatic without question. All right, let's talk about fictional characters. So let's say somebody was to meet you and say that you're most like this fictional character. What fictional character would you say that you're most like?
God, I know that there's an answer. I can't go first.
Oh man, God damn it!
A fictional character that I'm most like.
Yeah.
If my wife is watching, please text me. She probably knows the answer to that.
I know. I feel like we should choose each other's.
I mean,
instead,
go for it. Go for it. If it makes it easier, I'll take it.
I'm not ready.
So this is like somebody that we are. More like?
Yeah, you would say you were more like, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jesus, this is tough.
Mario, you got a real Denzel Washington type of trait to you, I think.
I like that. I'll take that. In what movie?
We'll say Man on Fire. How's that?
I'll take it. I like that.
God, I mean, can I just say this? I'm a huge Italian mobster movie and as well as TV show buff. So I don't know which one of these characters I would compare myself to, but I love this.
I mean, you're like a Robert De Niro through and through.
Okay,
man.
So I have been told that I have a Robert De Niro, like when people.
He wishes he was Italian.
I wish I was Italian, and I live in Brooklyn. I'm from New York, and I have just more in common with the Italian Americans, I feel, than I do with the people of my own race. So, I would just say that I'm kind of like
De Niro-esque.
I have a De Niro vibe. That's who I wish I was.
Although I always tell Chris that he reminds me of the guy from No Country for Old Men. What's his name? The big, like, scary dude in that.
I guess I make jokes. I do make jokes sometimes at home that as I age, that I am resembling Danny Trejo more than I would like to.
Yeah, the name you were looking for earlier, Mario, is Javier Bardem.
That's him. Yep.
Yeah.
That's him. He's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, he is. So, what about you?
My wife told me Animal from the Muppets.
Hey, I'm a big fan of Animals, so I'll take that one too. Somebody was throwing that my way. Yeah, without question. So, Mario, what about you, sir?
Oh wait, I just took yours. I just took yours and
you
ran
just
with
took Denzel and ran with it.
Denzel,
okay, we'll take it. All right.
Oh, actually, if anybody watches Narcos, there's a guy that looks like him. That's actually the FBI, the DEA guy on Narcos.
Yeah,
he actually looks exactly like Mario.
So he's got a bit of a doppelganger out there hanging out. Huh?
Yeah, I guess so.
To me, it's like so similar that it's wild.
Let's say, from your guys' perspective, what do you think is going to be mankind's demise? What is going to cause the human race to go extinct or face a threatening event, if you will?
I mean, mankind itself is my answer. That's going to be our demise.
I'd have to agree with that.
We'll kill ourselves, you know.
Yeah,
I feel like that demise has been coming for a long time, and you know,
for sure.
Yeah,
I'm not in disagreement. I think that as we advance as a world when it comes to technology and information, not just information to advance technology, but also just like the methods in which we sort of like market things and everything.
Yeah, just everything.
It's great, but it's dangerous, and there's a price to pay for everything. And it feels like at some point that a lot of the advancements will be the death of the whole fucking thing. So I mean, I don't know how that goes down.
I mean, I think religion will probably play a giant part in that.
Sure.
And I think that is the demise of mankind since the beginning is organized religion.
Definitely.
Plays into all the wars, plays into all the reasons why everybody
100%.
wants to kill each other. So
right.
It's already the demise of mankind.
Intelligence is not always a good thing. It can be your worst enemy when when it's used in the wrong ways. And
we make sure of that. We use it in all the wrong ways.
Right. There's a lack of balance in most aspects of the world and society and how we operate. And to live amongst that and find a balance for yourself in ways that work for you is kind of the best way to go about it, so you can enjoy your time before mankind kills itself.
Yeah.
I think kind of what we're all hitting on here.
Yeah.
You know what? I haven't even smoked joints or had an edible, and I just gave you some deep shit right there. So.
Well, you did. But I think the theme we're all hitting on here is kind of groupthink, right? So, and there's a lot of things that go behind groupthink, whether it's religion, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's political, there's all these driving factors, and often it's a marriage of all of these ideas. And we've seen too many unfortunate threatening things in our recent history, things like J6 and crazy shit like that going down, where it's seeming like more and more of an unfortunate possible reality.
Yeah. And in the long run, I guess it's greed and power are really the two things that humans just can't get away from. We're greedy and everybody wants to be powerful.
Also, I think what Mario said now to sort of think about that a little more, like religion. That's why wars happen. That's why we are in the Middle East and why a lot of shit is happening. It's because we are at war over religious beliefs and taking it to heights that are really just doing more damage to the
and
world.
Fighting for ideals that come from people that just were in power at one point and wanted to stay in power. Right. All this shit comes from just like classism from centuries
100%.
ago, basically, and it's money and greed, man.
It's a tale as old as time. We've been doing it since we've been mankind. Our tribalism, we've been warring with people with conflicting ideas just for the basic fact that they look different, they talk different, they act different than we do. Don't believe the same.
It's ridiculous.
There are better ways to work on your mental health than going to church.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
Whatever works for you, but
There's another PSA for the show. That'll be a nice clip. Thank you. Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. I'm going to let you off easy with one last question. What are you currently spinning? What are you currently listening to? And I know that might be a little bit more difficult for you, Mario, because you don't get to listen to as much new stuff, but I'll take anything you've got.
Chris is checking his Spotify. telling on him.
Hey, that's okay.
No. What am I currently listening to? That's a good question. Damn it. I'm so redundant on this thing, but I've been on a giant Cure kick. Actually, you know what? No, I take it back, because the last week I was listening to Fugazi's, is it The Argument? That record, like their last record, basically.
Yeah.
That record is so fucking incredible, and I listened to it like 3 days in a row. So that's what I'm spinning.
Incendiary, a really great hardcore band. Changed the way you think about pain. That's one of my favorite records right now. And if I need to retreat to hip hop, it's probably going to be the latest Run the Jewels RTJ4.
Very cool.
The last Mogwai was really good. It was a slow burn. Mario tried to get me into it, and I was reluctant, and then I ended up loving it. So, kind of three different styles I'm throwing out there.
And because of Gojira, I've been going back and listening to their new record, with their most recent record, which I never really gave it much time, and it's actually really fucking good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time today. Tell the good folks that are watching, listening today, the best way to stay in touch with the band and all the cool things that you guys have going on.
Not on TikTok.
Yeah, not on TikTok, but pretty much anywhere else that, the usuals, Spotlight's. It's either usually Spotlight's music or Spotlight's band. A little Google search will go a long way with the name.
Sure.
So,
and if you folks like what you hear from Spotlights, I can't encourage you enough to go through avenues such as a Bandcamp, especially when they do their Bandcamp Fridays, where the funds go more directly toward the artists. I always look at Spotify. I always tell people that's the commercial. If you like a band, go and invest, buy some physical media, buy some shirts. Do whatever you can to help support being in a band. We are going to have links for all of Spotlight's stuff in our on-demand versions of the episode, whether that's our YouTube episode or on our traditional podcasting platforms. So if you guys are listening to this, the smooth, velvety tones of my, preteen voice, you will be able to. You don't have to look while you're driving, folks. Look, whenever you get to a stop, just hit those episode details, and you can jump right to their stuff.
I just remembered we do have a website now. It's spotlightstheband.com.
Okay.
It's through a company called Super Tape, which is a new company that's doing kind of like a very cool thing with websites for bands these days. So if you're in a band, check out Super Tape as well. Supertape.com. Cool. Yeah.
First I've heard that, so I'll definitely have to check it out for myself and recommend it to others.
Kind of like a one-stop shop type thing for bands.
Yes, and all our tour dates are everywhere. People comment after we played in their city, and they go, "Why didn't you come to my city?" And we were just there.
Yeah.
Just check our socials and our website. It's all there.
Everything's posted.
Absolutely. Well, any special shout-outs you guys want to get in before we wrap it up today?
Well, shout out to Sarah. She couldn't be here. She's working
absolutely
at Wolf's Pub tonight. But
Sarah, we love you. Didn't mean to not spend enough time on your awesome bass playing as well. I want to mention that, and a fantastic artist as well.
But yeah, who else? Shout out to I'm going to give a shout out to Eric Klein from Line 6, Helix specifically. He's the product manager and designer.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
And
shout out to Jenkins Martin drums.
Yeah.
Shout out to Dream Cymbals.
That's right.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, everybody.
And shout out to Generation of Vipers.
There you go. Very nice. I was trying to pick out what your shirt said, but
these guys are great. If you haven't heard them, check them out.
Generation of Vipers. Absolutely. Will do once we get off the call. So you guys are going to hear Spotlight's music in the breaks, and then at the end of the episode, you guys are going to hear a full length of one of their songs to kind of further this experience that we have going on today. And we appreciate you gentlemen, both Mario and Chris from Spotlights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. you all for sticking around after the break. I would like to thank Chris and Mario for their time today from the band Spotlights. Spotlights, what a treat. So happy to have had the opportunity to talk to these fine gentlemen. Unfortunately, Sarah had some prior obligations and couldn't make the call tonight. So, Sarah, we love you too. But catch Spotlights. They're getting ready to do a big tour with Baroness and Soul Glow. I think there's some other bands hopping on and off at various times, at which we discussed in the conversation today, coming to a city near you. So stay tuned on social media. I do most of my business, as you listeners know, on Instagram in particular, but we try to stay up to date with all the other social media platforms just because we know that everybody has their preferences. So even if I capture one extra person going out there, we will definitely do so. Spotlights, I follow them on Instagram myself, and I know that they're very informative about what they have going on. I will say, Instagram, just like other social media, has gotten so bad about prioritizing things on people's feeds, just kind of like the algorithms and the echo chambers that you get into on social media. And there was a phenomenon that Mario and Chris both brought up, and the fact is that, like, oh, when are you going to come to my city? And they were just in these people's cities in a lot of cases. And that same thing happened to me. I was wondering, okay, well, when are these guys coming to St. Louis? And then I find out, I go back far enough on their social media, well, they were just in St. Louis like 2 or 3 weeks before, and I missed them, and I felt like such a shithead. But, you have to if you want to see a band and you know that you like that band, and this is something I've learned increasingly over the last few months, like for me, just my own little pro tips, I've started to take like screenshots, like if there's a show announcement or something, so I don't forget it. Because I periodically go through and clean up my camera roll or save a post on social media. Sometimes that gets a little daunting. I don't stay up with that. Or put it in your phone calendar, to revisit down the line. Or even if it's a band that you've found new that you like and you think, okay, well, hopefully I can catch them at a future show. Maybe make a little note on your phone and start a bucket list of okay, this is new bands that I want to see. And, it's the best piece of advice I can give folks in these instances right now, because social media is not doing a lot for a lot of people, especially if you're not injecting a bunch of money into it with target ads and things like that. And I'm a firm believer that your merits should speak for themselves, and I understand that the scape of technology and those things are starting to change over time, and it's getting more and more difficult to be a DIY band such as a Spotlights is. And but fortunately, they have relationships with awesome studios with very similar mindsets, with bands who built themselves up from their bootstraps, like Ipecac Recordings and Mike Patton, which you guys know how much of a fan we are of them, and everything that Mike Patton in particular does. But that's Spotlights. These guys are DIY till I die. They do almost everything in-house. They're very fan-friendly and interactive. Even, coming on to our show, these guys were very timely with communication, routine with communication, touching base routinely. And I know they've got a lot of big things in the works in the future as well that they could have been spending their time on, but they took the time out of their busy schedule to talk to us and our audience, so I can't thank them enough. And so let's talk about what we got going on next week. So next week, we're going to lean back into a little St. Louis love. We're going to be interviewing the band Still from St. Louis. So Still has some crossover sound-wise, I would consider, from Spotlights. So Still is an up-and-coming band in St. Louis that we called it actually at the punk rock flea market that we were a part of back in May, that's set up near the Arch. And we got to capture a lot of new artists there and build relationships with them. Bands like Direct Measure, hardcore band out of St. Louis, we had a few episodes back. J Coast, a St. Louis R&B artist who we had on a few episodes back as well. And we want to encourage folks to check out Still ahead of the interview and conversation that we're going to have with them. Still got some space rock, some alternative, and has some shoegaze influences, without question. When I first heard them, first chord progression on their first song of their set, immediately I thought 90s hum. So hum is, especially in more recent years, has become more of an influence and influenced some of the sound and my writing styles and things like that in bands that I've been in. And so I think that's, at least for me, that's high praise. So I'm really looking forward to talking to the guys and Still picking their brains about kind of what their influences are and all the cool things that they might have in the works coming up, and getting to know these guys a little bit better and have them a part of the ATI Podcast alumni, which is growing more and more with each episode. Other things we have in the works, so it's going to be a quick turnaround tomorrow night. Going live on the ATI Podcast Twitch channel is going to be Ridge Jackson and Jake Jackson, of course, for the Waxing On piece, that creative arm of us. That's where we're curating and encouraging physical media. and they're doing a concept episode this time. So they're not doing recent picks. They're not doing recent purchases, recent pickups. What they are actually doing is a concept. Over the last 5 years, their 10 most played albums. And this has to be something they physically have. So I think the majority of what you're going to see in here is vinyl, but there's going to be some cassettes in there. There's going to be some CDs. What are those anymore, right? So you guys are going to hear some picks from both Jake Jackson and Ridge Jackson. And these guys have really taken the ball and run on this one. And I'm really looking forward to this episode. The on-demand versions of that will hit all of our feeds following the Spotlights interview that we have here on this episode for you. So really looking forward to see what picks that they have, and maybe they'll bring some attention to some obscure artists or artists that we just haven't had the opportunity to talk about yet on the show. So their most spend album in the last 5 years. So it was an exercise that I thought was difficult, but like a fun difficult. So I actually made up a note on my phone of my own list. And of course I couldn't keep it to just 10. So I did like a tier, like 3 different heats. So the top heat was definitely what I knew to be in my top 10. The second heat was what I speculated to be in my, right behind that. And then the third heat had to be in the conversation. So I've got 30 different picks that I'll be sharing on my social media, as well as the ATI Podcast social media following the episode, just to kind of enhance some feedback. And I'd like to see some interaction and maybe encourage other folks to do the same. So let us know what you guys think with that episode whenever it hits. That will be episode 15 of Waxing On with RJ. Be sure to stay tuned to all the ATI Podcasts, social media that you're engaged with out there, just for future programming announcements and those sorts of things. We've basically announced our entire lineup for the rest of season 2, and we've only got a few holes, and even since I posted that, we've filled one of those 3 holes that we had in November. I've got some offers out there. There's some bands, in particular, I want to get a few more St. Louis bands that are on the rise out there, just to give them kind of a platform and an exposure to our wide international audience in particular. We've got listeners overseas and all over God's green earth. So that's something that I'm really proud of the show and the cross that it bears and the flag that it flies, is that we get folks to listen to artists that they've never heard before and may have not have heard of previously with some of our curated guest picks. So be sure to follow us on social media to see what bands are coming up. If you've got a band, if you want to stay the most in tune with what we got going on and timely, Instagram's the spot, at the ATI Podcast, as usual. I am Barrett, at Barry Insane on Instagram and Twitter, and we are out of time for this week. Until next time, good night and good luck. Stay safe out there.
Come with me, I
This is Barrett from the ATI Podcast. Each week, Josh and I discuss current events, pop culture, music, TV, movies, politics, sports. Nothing is out of bounds. You can also tune in to learn about rising artists, small businesses. Whether it's music, graphic design, filmmaking, or even a brick-and-mortar mom-and-pop shop, we will be spotlighting folks and their endeavors. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Anchor, or anywhere you enjoy your podcasts. Just search ATI Podcast. We would like to thank you for your continued support, and as always, please stay safe out there.
Hey, this is Josh from ATI Podcast. For show updates and news about the podcast, follow us on social media. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/ATI Podcast22, on Twitter at podcast_ATI, on Instagram at the ATI Podcast, on TikTok at ATI Podcast. DMs are always welcome. Have a question for the show? You can always email us at atipodcastquestions@gmail.com. Stay safe out there.